We're here today with Dr. Johnson from William & Mary, and he's going to speak with us about their Lemon Project. So, Dr. Johnson, when you're ready.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Ames and Mr. Townsend, for this warm introduction and this wonderful opportunity to share more about this wonderful project at William & Mary that I think has broader impact in the Williamsburg community as well as in this region. I'm Dr. Jajuan Johnson, as Mr. Ames has noted. I'm a social historian of African American life, history, and culture. As mentioned, I am a postdoctoral fellow at the College of William & Mary. I actually came here this past semester from Washington College in Chestertown, Maryland. And prior to that, I completed my doctorate degree at Arkansas State University in the Heritage Studies program with a focus that's concentrated on African American life, history, and culture, most particularly a study on African American church burnings, of more recent church burnings. And so I'm dealing with racialized violence in most of my academic research. But today, we're going to talk about the wonderful work of the Lemon Project. And I'm going to share this brief PowerPoint presentation, and then I'm going to have a brief conversation with Mr. Townsend and Mr. Ames more about the Lemon Project and some of our goals, our aims, what we want to accomplish, not only at William & Mary, but also throughout this region and throughout this community, and the work that we're doing broadly on a national and international level as being a model for other institutions who are engaged in researching their connection to the history of slavery in America and even internationally. So I'm gonna cue up my PowerPoint. Let's see here. All right. Technology is working for me today. That's a good thing. All right. Okay. And so I kind of always like to open with this quote, as said that William & Mary has really been leading the charge in grappling with this very complex issue of slavery in American society. One of the second actually universities to really take the lead in this area. But this quote really stands out as it relates to the Academy's complicity in slavery, but also it speaks broadly to how this entire civilization was built on this institution. And this is a quote by Stephen Wilder, which says that the Academy never stood apart from slavery, from American slavery. In fact, it stood beside church and state as a third pillar of civilization built on bondage. And I always often like to emphasize civilization, that it undergirded the entire civilization and this institution. So it's been something that we have been grappling with for quite some time. And hopefully with this project, we're finding meaningful ways to engage our community and really delving deeper into this very complex aspect of our American story. So today, here are a few of my discussion points. I'm going to talk about how the Lemon Project got started, and I think you'll find that very interesting as students who are watching this. Why is it important? Why is this project important? We're going to grapple with that as well. And I'm going to talk about our goals, what we're finding, and ways that you can hopefully get involved in this wonderful work. The Lemon Project, Journey of Reconciliation, as mentioned earlier, it's the second institutionally funded project of its kind in this particular country. And it began on an institutional level in 2009 with the Board of Visitors resolution that was really spurred by a student assembly resolution at William & Mary in 2007. And so this project resonates with me because it was spurred by students, and this shows the power of what can happen. The students wanted to delve into this very dark part of the university's past that had been in some ways not thoroughly researched and not really discussed, but they wanted to bring this to the forefront. So that shows you the power of students in making these types of appeals that are really critical in understanding our shared history. It is a multifaceted and dynamic attempt to rectify wrongs perpetuated against African Americans by William & Mary through inaction or action. And so this deals with slavery. It deals with the other ways that we are invested by omission or commission in the the brutality of individuals. And so this project is reparative in some sorts. And so through our programs, which I'll discuss a bit later, the examples of how we're attempting to rectify those wrongs. Involuntary servitude of and the exploitation of Native Americans by calling for reconciliation, and acknowledges the profound regrets on behalf of the Commonwealth of Virginia in its complicity and involvement and engagement in the exploitation of African Americans and Native Americans. Into an apology for Mary's role in Slavery Act, the Student Association again sponsored a bill and called the Board of Visitors to establish a commission to research the full extent of the college's role in slavery and to report its findings and establish a memorial to the regarding the contributions of slaves to the college. And that's kind of one of our major projects now that I'm going to later discuss on the on the memorial that we are constructing, that actually will begin construction pretty soon. Again, this is another resolution from the Board of Visitors that's kind of linked to our development as a project and hopefully further development. And these are our 4 goals that I kind of want to delve into today. And our long-term goal, long-term research project is really to understand and chronicle and preserve the history of African Americans at William and Mary and in the surrounding community, to build bridges between William and Mary, the Williamsburg community and the Tidewater region. And we also want to create an environment where everyone feels welcome and acknowledged. And we have some wonderful programs by which we're reaching that and accomplishing those benchmarks. We also want to continue to expand our leadership role, as I noted earlier, in the international movement of universities studying histories as they relate to slavery and its legacies. And so on our first goal, the long-term research project to understand and chronicle, I'll give you some examples of what we have done. Here recently, we actually released our report, which shows what we have discovered over the past 8 years. You can download this report online. You can access it on our website. You can just do a simple Google search, and I'll also provide the website to our project a little bit later, which make it easier. But you can also find it on a simple Google search. But it discusses our work over the past 8 years and the recommendations from the community, because one of the critical aspects of this is this concept called sharing authority, where we're working collaboratively and challenging these ideas, this idea where institutions pretty much lead the charge, these types of research initiatives, and really seeking to engage the input from the local community, in which that has been my background for years, in engaging communities on African American history and heritage, and to tell a more broader and fuller narrative. And hopefully that's what this report will show you what we have been doing over the past 8 years. This is just an example of how long the university has benefited from slave labor, or from the labor of enslaved people, for more years than it has not. Starting with the college's founding in 1693, on to 1865, which was the Civil War and following the abolishment of slavery. So that's 172 years of slavery. Then we have the post-Civil War years. This just kind of gives you an idea of how long the college has really invested or has benefited from the labor of those enslaved. And as mentioned, for more years than it has not. This right here is another document that's critical in our research, which was a William and Mary Charter. And it shows clearly that slave labor, the institution, was benefiting from slave labor. And this particular quote points that out. It says, "The said revenue of a penny per pound for every pound of tobacco which enslaved people were used to produce this tobacco, correct? And so it shows that all of the profits and advantages and emoluments to apply and lay out the foundation for the building and adorning the edifices and other necessities for the said college. And so the tobacco crops that have been produced by labor of the enslaved, these proceeds, these profits literally built this institution. And so this is the type of research that we're bringing to the forefront. We also have some challenging primary source documents. So if you don't know what primary source documents are, these are kind of like original documents. I mean, our interview today, could be considered a primary source document. You're doing an interview with me that could be used for whatever purposes. You could extract comments. So that's what we mean by primary documents. And with that, we have research reports, kind of financial reports of the universities that indicate those who were enslaved by the college, who enslaved them in some cases, and so have that information. Also, another critical part of the records, we have baptismal records. Church records are another primary source that's really helpful in us finding the names of those who were enslaved or rented, because that was another critical major industry in Virginia, is that many slaves were rented and brought in from other surrounding colonies. So that's another critical part of the story. We also have correspondence from the Board of Visitors, faculty, staff, and students, and we have lists that we have compiled of Board of Visitors, faculty and staff who enslaved people, and we have a list of those who are enslaved, and we're in the process now, as a part of my position as a fellow, to do genealogy research to hopefully link some of those enslaved persons with some of the current living descendants. And so these primary resources are critical to that. Oral histories, we have one collection of oral histories from the descendant community, material culture, archaeological studies that we have done on the campus and even in some other areas throughout Williamsburg, newspapers, critical primary source to us finding the information that we need. Another example would be runaway slave ads, which are accessible through the Library of Virginia. These are critical sources that we use where we're actually trying to build a narrative that speaks to the lives, to give a more fuller narrative of those who were enslaved, whether they were directly or indirectly connected to William and Mary. Okay. I'm also going to provide a few other examples, such as in 1708, Francis Nicholson, who was the governor of Virginia from 1698 to 1705, actually gave or gifted a enslaved person by the name of Price to the college. We also have records from 1717 to 1718 of enslaved people purchased to work at Nottawa, a plantation, which is a plantation that was owned by William and Mary. The work that I'm currently focused on now is the Bray School, which was a school that was established by a mission society that educated African enslaved persons as well as Native Americans. And it was not necessarily it was more of conditioning them. It wasn't necessarily this benevolent effort to really invest in their education as critically thinking individuals, but in essence, they were being trained to still be servants. and that was the nature of that society at that time. We also have, in 1777, William and Mary advertises the sale of enslaved persons, and I have some photos of some of these documents. I also try to give, in our research, we try to give those who read our research an idea as to the life of a William and Mary student during the time, particularly during the slave era, and the life of a person who was enslaved, who was working at the college. For an example, for a student, they were attending class, going to chapel. We have correspondence from those students. They were having, of course, like now, intellectual discourse, and also shows social activities. Of course, the life of an enslaved person was totally the opposite. They were working, cleaning students' boots and shoes, socializing, courting, also tending personal gardens. So they were there for domestic purposes, mainly to serve, like I say, to work for those who were students at the college, and some of the faculty and staff as well. This is a current list of those whom we have found, some named, some unnamed, who were enslaved by William and Mary. And all of these names, even those unnamed persons, they will be on our memorial to the enslaved. And so we are also adding to these names quite often, adding to this list quite often. And this is the list that I primarily use to research and because as mentioned, I'm doing genealogical research where I'm trying to make these linkages with the slaves and their living descendants, which is another project that I'll discuss a little bit later. I talked a bit earlier about the Bursars report, which is a financial report, and this has become one of those primary documents that I talked about earlier that's critical in how we find the names of those who were enslaved by the college. And this was a report from 1754 from the Office of the Bursar Records. It was from the book of Step from 1745 to 1170, that particular book. And it lists Negroes, of course, and you see the names here. It also lists some Native Americans as well. And so on this particular list, this particular type of list, we found the name Lemon, which I'll show you in a bit. But this is just an example of that primary source that I mentioned earlier, of where we actually obtained the names of those who were enslaved by William and Mary, and these documents are found in our special collections. I'm going to go past this because I think I've discussed this a little bit, because I wanted to get to the labor that was being done at Nottawa Plantation, and this is an example of a report in our special collections, one that shows that a Negro was paid for hops. And it kind of provides some details as to, it's a financial record in essence, but this is one of those primary sources that we use to extract information to further build out this narrative. Okay, so this right here is this is a sale. This is one of the, a notice, a sale notification, which kind of gives you an indication of the times and the documents that we are working with. And I'm going to go past this because I want to get to another document here. Okay, here. So the name of the Lemon Project derives from a man who was enslaved by the college, whose name is Lemon. And you will see him on this, what looks like a third row, but it's actually a second row. And his name is here, and this is under Negroes listed. I can't actually read that, but this was, he is the person by which the project is named. We have very little information about his life. We're still working to find further information, but so hopefully that will happen. But I just kind of want to show you this document because we found several documents that talked a few documents that talked a little bit about his life, but our project's name, he's our project's namesake. These are some other individuals who are owned by the college that we are still researching, and I'm trying to make these linkages to their current descendants. Our next goal is building bridges between William and Mary and the African American community. And I'll give you some examples of how we're doing that. And as I mentioned earlier, this example of this shared authority or this collaborative effort where we're trying to really deeply engage the community, even in our decision-making processes. And this is our committee regarding on the memorial for the enslaved persons that's being erected this year. And this just shows you the very diversity of people who are involved in this group. Students, community members, faculty, staff, they all converge to present ideas and also to review those who actually submitted proposals to construct this memorial. Since we've been working, these are a few things that we've done. We've had several listening sessions with the community. We see, as I mentioned earlier, input On the memorial to the enslaved, we have community members who are serving on our community. We're doing oral history interviews. We're doing genealogy. I'll be hosting a workshop next week on the 18th of February at 6 p.m. and I'll have that information later. I also will be hosting a series of genealogy research research workshops this summer. And we have some wonderful partners where we're going to really delve into that. And hopefully we're going to develop a cohort of community members who with interest in delving into their history and delving and presenting those stories. We also have a porch talk that we do probably every month. And this is a lecture series. We bring in experts on many different areas who are dealing with all manner of issues from reparations to racialized violence. So we try to bring in a wonderful array of speakers for these symposiums. The Hearth Project design. This is kind of what I'm looking most forward to. This is the memorial to the enslaved, and it was the project and the design and the concept was inspired by the idea of illumination, and is actually created by William and Mary alum. He wants to figuratively illuminate the forgotten history and memory of enslaved people who sacrificed and contributed immeasurably to William and Mary over half of the college's history. And then to physically illuminate a shared space for community gatherings and reflection for generations to come. So we're hoping that this will be a healing space of sorts. This is us paying homage to those whose shoulders we still stand on. And so hopefully this will be an environment where where that can be used in many different creative ways. And we're open to different ideas that even you may want to share with us. And I'll have contact information later where you can present some ideas as to the programming that will revolve around this particular monument. And these are some photos of what it will look like. And it will be featured in a very prominent space on campus. It won't be tucked away behind somewhere, where people can't see it. But we want it to be visible as we are bringing some visibility to those persons whose shoulders we still stand on. And so this is us kind of imagining, what type of space this will be, and hopefully it will draw a diversity of people. This is an example of where it will actually be situated, a layout rather. And so when it is erected, hopefully, we'll be able to gather in person, and we'll have a big party and all that kind of good stuff, following COVID measures, I'm quite sure at that time as well, but, but it will be fun. So our third goal is to encourage the development of an atmosphere on campus that makes all students feel welcome and acknowledged. We're a higher education institution. Our purpose is to serve our students and our community. We are a public trust. And so with that, we want to create an environment where all ethnicities, all cultures are invited to express themselves and exist without any resistance. So one of our programs is the donning of the Kente, which started in 2012. It's kind of a rite of passages type of program where we initiated the donning of the Kente during commencement weekend. And it's a rite of passage ceremony that features African-centered traditions where graduates, undergraduates, and graduate professionals come together to celebrate this accomplishment. And all students are welcome to participate in this. And these are some photos of some of our wonderful graduates who are undergoing this rite of passage. And because we believe that education is a community celebration, that's a central core, has always been a central core to African-American communities. And we like to center that in this ritual. So what do we have going on? We have a lot of stuff happening. On February the 11th, which is, I guess that's tomorrow, right? We have a memorial to the enslaved panel discussion, the Muscarelli Exploration, Healing by Design with a panelist, Sean Glover, Jody Allen, who is the director of the Lemon Project, and the designer, an archaeologist. They are all going to be on a wonderful panel where they're going to discuss this memorial to the enslaved in more in depth. Also on February the 15th, we have a program, The True Status of Descendants Enslaved Africans in America, Porch Talk with J. Person Lynn, my workshop on February the 18th, and then we're going to have a magnificent symposium in the spring, March 27th, 26th, and 27th. This is going to be a dynamic symposium, and it's all held virtual. All of our programs are virtual for the remainder of this semester. It may change next semester in some ways, hopefully. On April the 8th, we're going to have a dynamic speaker, Minnie Jean Brown Trickey of the Little Rock Nine. I don't know how many of you all are familiar with that story, but I encourage you to read it. And she's going to be talking about nonviolence as a way of life. And this is going to be a fabulous presentation. And I believe she's going to offer us some direction that relates to our current set of crises. So, as mentioned, we're continuing, and I'm almost closing here, but we're going to continue to expand our leadership role nationally, internationally, in the national and international movement of universities studying their histories that relate to slavery and its legacies. And these are some of the institutions that are currently studying that we're in partnership with. So we're not just doing this alone, but this is quite a movement, and these colleges and universities are engaged in many different ways. Of course, these stories look different, and the community engagement approaches are different in every community, but we are all working collaboratively, hopefully to push these issues and more to the forefront, to offer more robust conversations around slavery and its modern day implications. Ways you can follow us: we're on all social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and pretty much our names are the same on there. You can just put in WM Lemon Project and we will pop up, and you can see all of you can get regular updates on our programs, what we have going on. And if you want to learn more about us, you can either do a simple Google search, or you can register on our, on this particular link to get more information and updates about our program. And that is all for now. I am open to any questions that we may have. It has been a pleasure indeed sharing this information. And I look forward to learning of ways that, like I said, we can further be engaged and involved with the community, with your school. We see this as a collaborative effort, and so we're open to input, we're open to ideas. And so we just believe that we can make things better in some ways with this type of collaboration.
Thank you very much, Dr. Johnson. Howard, do you have any specific questions that you would like to ask?
I would, Dr. Johnson. Thank you for sharing your research with us. One thing that struck me was looking at your use of primary sources. Mm-hmm. And looking at like Bursar's reports. Could you talk a little bit about how you were able to get your hands on and find these primary documents?
Yeah. Well, a lot of these documents are all, they're in our special collections at SWIM Library. And so these records have been there, and this work has been ongoing for quite some time, since 2009. So we've had several graduate students, postdoctoral fellows who have been a part of this project, and they have collected this information over several years. And so I'm just really kind of coming in the fold and presenting some new information, particularly as it relates to genealogical research. But most of these primary sources have been found at SWIM Library, as well as the Library of Virginia has a wonderful source. There's a project, and it just left my head, an online database. But if you just Google African-American history at Library of Virginia, there is a database that particularly focuses on African-American history and culture in Virginia. And there's all types of primary source documents from runaway slave ads to wills of those who possibly who enslaved persons. And so most of this comes from there as well. Also, the Library of Congress is a wonderful source of information. So we use the local sources, particularly those who maybe had worked for William and Mary, who were faculty, staff, and had some tie, especially with the board. They have many of their papers are housed at the college. And so we're able to, and it's not, of course, as you know, not always an easy task because most of these are not indexed. We actually have to look through each document and hoping, and sometimes we're just kind of going on hope. They're hoping that we find something, and that magical moment happens where you find a person, you find a list, and so it's really consistently mining the sources, and you don't always know what you're walking into when you approach that source.
Thank you for that. A few years ago, my grandfather passed away, and in his passing, we were collecting his things, and we found an old Bible.
Oh, wow.
And in the front of the Bible, it was a listing of people who owned the Bible, and it was really the genealogy of our family. And at the time when we found it, I said to my mom, I said, maybe we need to scan this, or do something with this. This doesn't feel like just a Bible anymore. This is really a collection of who we are now.
Absolutely. And that was pretty common. That was one of the ways that, births were documented. Especially before birth records were kept, midwives, it aids in the delivery of a child, and the child's name is documented in the family Bible. And so that is a source that we use as well. That's a primary source that's very vital, particularly in African American genealogy research. And so also obituaries, we use those as well. They're all a critical piece of that puzzle, but Bibles are very, very important, old Bibles, in terms of the information they provide to us in the type of research that we're doing.
Well, Dr. Johnson, I really appreciate everything that you were sharing with us today. It's really exciting to hear the amount of work that's happening right here in Williamsburg.
Absolutely.
We're on the forefront of this. So I'm hoping some of our young people kind of hear a little bit about how you started this research. We've got some young people who are very interested in learning the history of Williamsburg. Yeah, well, so I really appreciate you taking time to speak to us this afternoon.
Yeah, and I also thank you all so much for inviting us to talk. And we're also actually, tomorrow afternoon, we're actually starting a planning phase for a youth camp. It's kind of like a history type of boot camp that we're planning to do in the summer. And so I'll have details about that I can also forward to Chris about that project that we're going to do this summer. It's going to be like a week-long project. Of course, initially the plans were to gather students on campus, but we're going to have to take a virtual format in this program. And so really excited just about the ways that we're engaging everyone in the community. We definitely want younger people to be involved, to be engaged, to find a place in this research and in this work that we're doing. That is, I think, very, very critical at this time as we kind of grapple with these, what I call critical heritage issues of monuments, of violent resistance and all that. Where is this coming from? There's a history there. And so I think that the more we delve into that, the more we'll really understand the sources of some of the tension, the present tension that we have. So that's what we do.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it.